On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, know your target audience.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law. So those of you that have been listening for a while know that twice a year, my homeowner association has a community-wide garage sale. And so as I record this, our garage sale was a week ago. It was the first weekend, the first Saturday in May, which I think this year, 2021, was May 1. And we'll have another one in October. And a while back, I studied what was going on at the garage sale, and I saw some referral knowledge come out of that, some sales knowledge come out of that. And so episode 68 of the Crushing Debt Podcast is all about negotiations and all about how I practice my negotiation skills at a garage sale. And that trend has continued. Then episode 86 was after the next garage sale, and what I talked about there was presentation. Episode 118, I talked about patience. Episode 168, I talked about preparation. And then episode 241, I talked about approach. And we just had our last garage sale, like I said. And I think what I wanted to talk about today, what I really focused on in this garage sale, was knowing and understanding the target audience. Now, before I get into any of that stuff, I do want to talk about our sponsor real quick, Sam Cohen of Attorneys First Insurance. Sam is a great friend and a great supporter of the show, and we really appreciate his sponsorship that helps offset a lot of the costs that create us bringing this podcast to you. And so a great way to help me and a great way to help our sponsor, Sam at Attorneys First. If you know an attorney or title company whose errors and omissions insurance is ready to renew, then I would refer them over to Sam Cohen at Attorneys First. You can contact him, sam@attorneysfirst.com, or the website, attorneysfirst.com. He writes errors and omissions insurance, which is also called malpractice insurance or E&O coverage for attorneys and title companies, specifically here in the state of Florida, but I know he writes all over the country, and if he's not necessarily licensed in your state, he can become licensed in your state. So, again, a great way to support us is to support our sponsor, which is Attorneys First Insurance, and our friend Sam Cohen. So, I want to get into this topic a little bit more, this topic of know your target audience. And so, what do I mean? Well, in terms of the garage sale itself, it was things like, who's going to come to the garage sale first thing in the morning? What kind of things do I want to put out for sale first thing in the morning? You know, I had a lot of my bachelor pad stuff. I've been married now 11 years. We've been in this house 10 years. And so a lot of that bachelor pad stuff probably needs to be sold or be donated to Goodwill or given away to somebody. And so I wanted to start to get rid of a lot of that bachelor pad stuff. But I knew that the type of people that wanted that stuff were not going to be the very first ones to come to the garage sale. So I didn't put it out right away. I waited until we were closer to 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, the garage sale started at 8 and went till 1. So I waited until we were closer to 11 o'clock in the morning, closer to when a lot of the people that might be interested in bachelor pad stuff would be cruising through the neighborhood at garage sales. And, of course, I sold a bunch of the stuff, and it didn't have to sit in the sun, and it didn't have to bake in the heat, and it didn't have to do any of that. So I waited until I knew that audience was going to be working the garage sale to put that kind of stuff out. You know, the things of the most of the people that come early to the garage sale are the moms and the grandmothers and all that type of stuff. So the stuff that would appeal to them, the baby clothes, the baby toys, those types of things. I put those things out right at the beginning. Those were the first things I made sure were out because I knew the people that were interested in it were typically going to be the people that showed up right at the beginning of the garage sale. You know, the kids' toys. I put the kids' toys out right away because a lot of the parents are cruising out with their kids in the morning to go to the garage sale before it gets unbearably hot or before the kids get bored and want to do other stuff that day. So a lot of the kids' toys, a lot of the kids' stuff went out right away because I knew some of the people at the beginning of the garage sale were going to be interested in that stuff. Again, the infant toys, the infant clothes, all that kind of stuff. When should I put it out? When are the people that are going to be interested in that kind of stuff going to be visiting the garage sale? Now, how does this translate to sales? How does this translate to your systems? How does this translate to eliminating debt? Well, again, you've got to speak to what your audience wants. You've got to know your target audience. And so if I want to try to convince a creditor that my debtor has no money, if I want to convince a creditor that my client has no money, I need to know when to display that stuff. When should I send the financial statement? When should I send the bank statements? When should I send the tax returns? Do I need to send those types of things? So as you're negotiating with your creditors, as you're negotiating for lower debt, understand what evidence that you have that shows that you should get that deal from the creditor, and when should you display it? When should you promote it to the creditor? You want to know your target audience. You want to know what your target audience is looking for, and then you want to provide the things that speak to your target audience. So I want to talk about this topic a little bit more, but what I want to do is jump back into some of the other topics I've talked about in terms of garage sales, in case any of you are interested in reviewing those episodes. So again, we've got episode 68, which is all about negotiations. And one of the interesting things there is, I've said before, and I did at this garage sale, if I want to sell something for $5, but I get offered $3, well, you know what? It's worth the $2 to not have to put that thing back in the garage and lug it back out in October. Now, some of the stuff we boxed up and we put into my car and we drove it over. Goodwill comes out and stations a couple of trucks here in the neighborhood at every garage sale on the day of the garage sale, so that if we don't sell everything, we can donate it to Goodwill. And a lot of the stuff we ended up this year donating. I think I took 2 carloads. And for those of you that don't know, just got a new car, just got a Nissan Rogue SUV where I could lay down the back seats, and still with laying down the back seats took 2 carloads of stuff over to Goodwill that we did not sell at the garage sale. So you've got to be aware in terms of negotiations. What do you want? What does the other side want? What are you willing to give up to get rid of the thing that you're trying to negotiate? Are you willing to give up the $2 to avoid taking it back in the garage? If you're going to donate it to Goodwill and you're not going to put it back in the garage, then why not take the $3 for it instead of the $5 for it? So in terms of practicing negotiation skills, I think garage sales are a great place to do that. It's not a very high impact. It's not a very high stress environment. If you want to buy something for $3 and it's for sale for $5 and the person says no, well, you don't get the thing and you don't spend the $3. It's not like, this is a contract to feed your family money because you got paid a huge amount on the sales commission, but it's a great place to practice those kinds of skills. Episode 86 was presentation. And so one of the things I remember about recording that episode was it was all about the way that I presented what I was trying to sell at the garage sale. Did it have all its pieces? Did it have the original box? Was the box broken? Was the box in good shape? Did the item itself was in good shape? Were there any pieces missing from the item? Now, how does this relate to negotiating with creditors? Did you fill out all the financial information accurately? Did you fill it out in pen? Did you fill it out by typing it? Did you provide supporting documentation? What presentation are you giving to your creditor in order to get the negotiation, get the result in the negotiation that you want? And so that was episode 86. I talked all about presentation in terms of a garage sale. The next one was episode 118, and I titled that one Patience. And the thought about that episode was you've got to be patient. I mean, this garage sale runs from 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Now, true, some of the best deals are right at the beginning, or like I said in today's episode, know your target audience. Maybe I don't want to put something out right away because I know the person that might buy that thing isn't going to come by until much, much later in the garage sale. But the point of the episode of patience is you've got to be patient for what you want. So if I put something out at 8 o'clock and it doesn't sell by 9, I'm not going to pack up the garage sale at 9 o'clock. I may need to wait. Just like you have to have patience with your creditors. If you make them a first offer and they don't get back to you, wait. it may be okay to wait. Wait for them to make a counter. Wait for them to see what their counter is. Or if they're not getting back to you, maybe the silence is what you want. Make them think that you don't have the money and that you can wait. Because if you're constantly on your creditor about, will you accept the deal? 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 They may think there's something going on in the background. Maybe you're going to get an inheritance. Maybe you're going to get a big payday at the office. Maybe you're going to get something that would allow them to collect more money from you. But by being patient, you can maybe bluff a little bit, and it won't be so strenuous to try to get the negotiation result that you want. So episode 118, that was all about patience. Episode 168, preparation. So again, my wife and I talk about, what do we want to sell at the garage sale? What do we want to sell it for? What kinds of things do we want to sell? What is going to come out of the house into the garage? What's going to go from the garage to Goodwill? What are we going to try to sell? You want to make sure that you're adequately prepared for this garage sale. Just like when you're talking to a creditor, you want to be adequately prepared. What's your hardship? Why did you fall behind? What is it that you want the creditor to do? Why should the creditor settle with you? Why should the creditor settle with you at the amount you want to settle? What are all the questions that the creditor is going to ask you that you need to be prepared to answer? What are all the things the creditor is going to want to know, and are you prepared to answer those questions? You've got to be prepared. And then the last one, episode 241. This one was kind of interesting because this one dealt with approach. And episode 241 was the first garage sale we had after the pandemic hit. And so pandemic hit in March. We did not have a garage sale in May, but then we scheduled a garage sale in October, and it was the very, very first time that we had had a garage sale since the inception of the pandemic. And so one of the things I talked about in that episode is, what is your approach? And a couple of interesting things that came out of that episode. What I noticed, which happened again in this past Saturday's garage sale, is people would, prior to the pandemic, people would park on the side of the road, and then they would walk. They would walk the entire block. They'd walk a 2-block area. They'd walk whatever. They'd walk as far as they were comfortable walking given the weather, come back to their car, drive to the next spot, walk however far they were going to walk, drive back to their car, or walk back to their car, drive to the next spot. People did a lot of walking. People did a lot of exploring. People did a lot of just being outside. After the pandemic hit, in last October's garage sale, we saw a lot of what we saw a little bit of at this garage sale was the approach. So people would drive by in their car with the windows rolled all the way up. You could see them slow down when they saw that you had stuff in your driveway. They would then look at what you had in your driveway, and that would make the determination whether they stopped and got out or whether they just kept on driving. And so what I did was I started experimenting with the approach. So as I saw them driving by, some I would wave at, some I would not wave at, and I would see how much that made people stop. And I think it was mixed, because I'd wave at them and they'd think I was crazy maybe and keep driving, and some of them liked that I was being friendly, and so they would stop and get out. But when they got out, sometimes I would engage them. Good morning, how you doing? Great day for a garage sale. How's it going? Some I didn't. And I tried to see, of the people that I engaged, how many would buy. Some I would say, is there something in particular that you're looking for? And some would answer me, and some would not. And I would, have those types of conversations. And so again, what is your approach? And so the way that this translates to eliminating your debt, what is your approach with your creditors? Is it open? Is it, hey, I need some help. I would really love to get some help. I'm hoping that you and I can work together collaboratively, a creditor, to resolve my situation. Or are you calling in, this isn't fair, you're taking my money, and you're evil, and you're a bank, and you should be bailed out, and blah, 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 blah. What is your approach to this particular creditor? I've always been a fan of, you catch more flies with honey than you do with the other stuff. So, what is your approach? How are you approaching the creditor? How are you approaching people in a sales position? And so that was episode 241, was what is your approach? So again, you can go back and listen to any of these episodes. I know that Apple only keeps a directory of about 200 episodes. So if you're listening to this on Apple, or if you're listening to this on another podcast player that has a limited number of podcast episodes, you can always go to yesnerlaw.com/podcasts with an S, and that'll take you all the way back to episode 1. You can search them all. You can also go to crushingdebtpodcast.com, I believe, is the Crushing Debt website, and you can search all of these episodes. So again, episode 68 on negotiations, episode 86 on presentation, episode 118 on patience, episode 168 on preparation, episode 241 on approach, and now this episode on knowing your target audience. And again, you want to make sure you're doing research. Now, this brings up kind of an interesting point, know your target audience. What a lot of people will say to me is, well, Sean, this is not the original creditor, and I know that they must have bought it for 15 cents on the dollar. So if I owe 10 grand and they bought it for 15 cents on the dollar, why won't they take $1,500 or $1,600 or $2,000, even though they're getting a really good return on their investment by taking just a little bit more than what they paid for the debt? Well, here's the problem. Debts are negotiable instruments, mostly. They're based on promissory notes. They're based on credit card contracts. They're based on other things. And so the amount of the debt is the amount of the debt. If I'm a creditor and I buy these debts for a living, then what I paid for the debt is really irrelevant. It determines what my profit is going to be, but it doesn't determine how much you owe. And so if you know that the creditor only paid $1,500 for a $10,000 debt, maybe that's a good sign that you could offer $4,000 or $5,000 and the creditor would make a profit. But again, that's largely irrelevant. So if I write a check that I owe you $100 and I give you that check, and then you sell that check to Mary for $90. So you get $90, Mary gets a check worth $100 that she can then cash in her bank. Can my bank say, well, Mary, you only bought that check for $90, so we're only going to pay you $95? No. My bank has to pay Mary the $100. Doesn't matter that she bought it for $90 from the person that I wrote the check to. So, again, know your target audience. Maybe this is a bulk debt buyer, and they can afford to take a big discount, which would still be a big gain for them. Maybe this is a smaller outfit that plunked all of its money into this one debt, and they're going to chase you for it. So you've got to know your target. You've got to know your audience. You've got to know your target audience, for lack of a better term. So, a little bit of a shorter episode this week, but something that I always think is fun in terms of practicing my sales skills at a garage sale. Let me know if you think there's anything I missed, anything I didn't cover. Let me know if there's a different spin that you want to put on it. Give me drop me a comment, send me an email, do something to let me know. But I think that'll do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Again, a little bit of a shorter episode, but again, lessons that I learned at a garage sale, I love bringing to all of you. Every time I do a garage sale, it gives me a low stress environment to practice some negotiation skill or some sales skill that I can then turn around and use when I'm actually negotiating the big deals for the clients. I can practice those skills at a garage sale, hopefully make myself better in the process, and I hope you enjoy this content. So, like I say at the end of every episode, I hope that at the end of the money you have more month. I hope that at the end of the month, good Lord, you'd think I'd get this right the number of times I say it. I hope that at the end of the month you have a lot more money, rather than at the end of the money you have a lot more month. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. I promise I will get that right going forward here, and I look forward to talking to you in next week's episode.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.